Egghead Island, an ark full of mysteries and answers, technology and devil fruit abilities, and one of the last islands before the final push. We've seen some characters get some serious shine, but what about my boy Franky? You mean to tell me we're going to go through the entire Egghead arc and we're not getting some major Franky moments? Not even a flashback? Remember, Franky's time skip was based on Vegapunk's home island, and we know the time skips give invaluable clues as to the direction of the Straw Hat's individual journeys. For example, recently we saw a yokai, a form of demon, summoned through a ritual circle. This fits with Brook's time skip and might suggest it has to be Brook that needs to use his soul fruit to instill a soul into a yokai for the Straw Hats to be able to defeat it. All this is to say, Franky's story is not finished in Egghead yet. A long trail of clues over years strongly suggests that Franky will not only receive KUMA'S Paw Paw Fruit, but will also be the first ever devil fruit user to swim. Will Franky be the one to take the Straw Hats to underwater Laughtail? Does Franky already share connections with KUMA? And how does all this tie into the final part of the story? Now, I know everybody who's watching this is a Chad, but 90% of the viewers are not subscribed Chads. So do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subbed. It's the best way to support the channel and keep us putting out the free content we're so passionate about. Now, without further ado, I present to you the perfect Egghead theory. There's so much evidence to the idea that Franky gets KUMA'S fruit that I'll start by just drawing some of the most immediate connections and go from there. For example, straight off the bat, we have this colour spread where we find Franky with KUMA'S bear ears, in addition to him embracing a bear in a way that makes Franky look like half Franky and half a bear. And did I mention this colour spread appeared in the middle of the Jinbei cover story? This cover story has this panel depicting a symbol we see worn by KUMA. Could this be the ancient Buccaneer kingdom? Stick around and find out. For now, here's another Franky and KUMA connection. We see Franky's arm makes the paw paw shape when firing. When Franky needs to do fine tuning with his clunky hands, such as using a screwdriver, smaller hands like paws come out, which resemble KUMA's paws. Both characters are cyborgs. KUMA's lineage was used to create the pacifistas, which are described as weaponry. Franky specializes in weapons technology. Franky often wears the glasses and KUMA has the lenses after being experimented on. Pre-time skip, Franky's Jolly Roger is the same color scheme as KUMA's character design, and what do we have? Another 3 dots. I wonder if we made this closed eye on the right open, what it might look like. Franky wears the chains around him, and KUMA, although not exactly willingly, also wears chains. KUMA's Seraphim S-Bear wears a jacket with a star on it that connects in 2 halves, just like Franky's arms, which come together to make one complete star. KUMA is an officer in the Revolutionary Army, and Franky's an officer for the Grand Fleet. One of Franky's trademarks is to exclaim that he's a pirate proudly. The definition of a buccaneer is a pirate, originally from the Caribbean, and KUMA is a buccaneer. Franky's birthday was given as March the 9th, exactly 1 month after KUMA's February the 9th birthday. Guess who was the first to come across KUMA on Sabaody, an island that parallels Egghead, through themes like green blood? That's right, Franky. And where did he send him of all places? Vegapunk's island. We just saw KUMA's flashback, which heavily featured the drums of liberation, and Franky's true name, Cutty and Flam, are both types of drum rhythms. Both characters are shown to have weird ball joints for shoulders, and it was pretty explicitly stated Franky shouldn't have been able to come anywhere near to stopping a train with his bare hands, suggesting he may not be just human, something that lines up with KUMA's special race. They also both come from the South Blue originally, which for Franky is revealed in chapter 490, in which also KUMA takes orders from Sengoku in Marijois while holding his Bible. And yeah, that is right, that weird Bible that people think connects to Emu has actually been inside Marijois before. Strange. But back to Franky getting the paw paw fruit. KUMA's blood type is X, and Franky has the more advanced XF blood. In 1095, Franky uses his extended arm to quickly move Luffy out the way of Saturn's attack, which some may disagree, but I think has the paw paw fruit vibes all over it. Another cheeky stretch I'll try squeeze in is the palm trees Franky wears on his shirt. Palm trees are connected to Egghead Island, and the word palm itself refers to part of the hand, which is where KUMA's paws can be found. But anyway, I'll stop reaching and show you some real connections and bring this all together. So when we arrived at Egghead, we all assumed this was going to be a big time for Franky, especially as he's an absolute huge huge Vegapunk fan. However, by the end of the first half of Egghead, we only really saw some new mysteries and twists and some O'Hara lore drops. Nothing about Franky. Now, does this suggest to you that Franky won't get the glow up, or do you think this is a sign Franky is due some major upgrades? Let me know in the comments, but if you're not convinced yet, get ready because this next one is just too much evidence. So when you line up the devil fruits of all the Straw Hats, we get the phonetics for the numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 10, meaning the Straw Hats are missing 2 and 9. The phonetic for 2, 9 is Ni-Q, so the Straw Hats are missing a Ni-Q fruit, which translates to the Paw Paw fruit. In addition to this, both Franky and Kuma have undergone major transformations, from his origin as the fearsome Cutty Flam to becoming the shipwright of the Straw Hats. With Franky, we also have the enigmatic Bartholomew Kuma, the tyrant, who went through a very crazy transformation of his own. We don't know everything about Kuma's past, just like Franky, and the flashbacks are pretty confusing. Here we see Kuma in his early 20s, and he's got the ears, but here's Kuma looking older, whilst with Bonnie and no barriers. Here's Kuma as a kid with no barriers, and then here he is with them. So straight away we have some inconsistencies that will hopefully be tied up with Kuma's flashback. Point is, however, they've both undergone some serious physical transformations over the years. The genius Vegapunk plays a pivotal role in both characters' narratives, raising questions about how their paths might intersect before this all concludes. Both characters are particularly selfless as well, putting the needs of others before their own. For example, Franky built the Thousand Sunny for the Straw Hat Pirates, while Kuma's last wish was to protect the Thousand Sunny and its crew. But what does all this mean to the story currently? Well, there are a few things that we can put together. One thing we can see is that Franky has better technological insight than Vegapunk during the Egghead arc, particularly when it comes to stuff like lineage factor. This is shown by Franky making observations before Vegapunk, and then soon afterwards Vegapunk confirming the observations to be true. So it could be that Franky also takes on Vegapunk's will somehow. The two are tied through weaponry and character design quite heavily, which I do have a video on that you can check out. I'd be interested to see if Franky attached the photon gloves at any point and could use them gloves to manipulate the sort of will bubbles that you can make with Kuma's ability and things like that. Also, it does make me think about the Battle Frankies and their ties to sort of the satellites and also the Seraphim. Now, let me ask you a question. What happens to devil fruit users when they're in a body of water? They sink, right? But what happens to the person, let's say, if they're covered in flotation devices? Would they still sink? Strange question, I know, but there's a reason why I bring it up. Remember, Franky didn't take the mirror because he still wanted to have the ability to swim, characterized also by the classic Franky Speedo that's currently heavily in fashion. In addition to thinking Franky will get Kuma's fruit, I speculate he may also be the first devil fruit user to be able to swim. We have a nice bit of foreshadowing in this colour spread. We can find evidence to support this in recent chapters where Franky was only half petrified by S-Snake for some reason. It was also foreshadowed when Boa kicked the Pacifista and only half of it turned into stone. This is because, like Kuma, Franky is a cyborg, meaning his body is not completely human. So would the sea affect Franky the same way it would your average human? After all, he runs partially on cola as opposed to pure will like average humans. Some ships have a Klabauterman, which is similar to the will inside a devil fruit, and yet they manage to float somehow. Maybe it's because they're machines too. Lastly, if you're familiar with the channel, you'll probably know that I think Laughtail is underwater, so Franky being able to swim and take the Straw Hats deep into the sea, alongside the colour spread I already mentioned, does make me think Oda's leaving some clues hinting towards this. Another colour spread that might suggest this shows Franky driving the boat that the Straw Hats are on through the sea. Another example is when Oda drew Franky at different ages, where Franky literally became a ship in his old age. In this colour spread, we see out of all of the Straw Hat Pirates, Franky is the only one whose hairstyle is a whale. Maybe a reach, but just over his shoulder in this colour spread, another whale. Oh, and let's not forget the colour spread where Franky's the only one wearing a flotation device. So in this one, we see all the Straw Hats except Franky, who's instead replaced by a hippo, an animal that spends a lot of time in water. Another colour spread with a hippo, we see all the Straw Hats again except for Franky, who seems to be instead a boat used by Robin and Chopper. And in this final colour spread, we can see everybody's having a good time except for Franky, who's been thrown into the sea off the boat. Remember when Franky and Luffy first met in Water 7? They were fighting and Franky was showing off his powers. There's a scene where he falls into the water and Luffy was like, well, that's the end of him. Then Franky bursts out through the water. Luffy was like, wait, how aren't you a devil fruit user? And Franky says, "Nah, I'm a cyborg so I can swim." But how do I actually think this is going to take place? Well, I do believe in 1096 we are going to see the return of Kuma, if not 1097, and I believe it will happen pretty soon. It will be within the same chapter or the beginning of the next chapter, probably within the same. I think Kuma's going to die, and Vegapunk is going to do something drastic to ensure the will does not get reincarnated and lost. Instead, he's going to harness it somehow, and they're going to quickly have to make a decision in which Franky will decide, I'll take the fruit if Vegapunk can keep me swimming. Also, let's not forget the Franky family. One of the girls in the Franky family wears a blue bear on her t-shirt, foreshadowing for Franky but being a bear. This blue bear is also visible in the Halloween colour spread as well. If you spent time in the TLA Discord, then you would have heard me moaning about the fact that I don't know how the Straw Hats will leave Egghead. At first I thought they'll fire out the top, that was partially a theory I was working on. I thought that even more so when the Navy turned up, but now Kizaru's there, it makes me think that he's too quick for any of them to leave anyway like that. The only place Kizaru cannot leave is underwater. So, what happens if all of us, the Straw Hats, Franky, go underwater directly, and maybe sneak under the Navy ships? Franky rejected Luffy's offer to eat a devil fruit, saying he likes to swim, which is a reasonable excuse, but it does set up the idea of getting a fruit that allows the user to swim. Franky's matchup in Dressrosa was Senor Pink, a man whose devil fruit allows him to swim, technically speaking, as I mentioned in the intro. This sets up the idea that you can get a devil fruit and swim, but it has to be through via some sort of loophole. Now, I did touch briefly on Franky inheriting Kuma's will, but we also believe that Franky is potentially a D member with his name Cud D Flam, as Coob talks about. However, that's all coming up in the next video, which is done by Straw Hat Lucas, so make sure you stick around for that. And that's where we'll cover the fact that the Buccaneers have this underwater kingdom with these symbols, and there's a difference with these symbols that appear on Kuma. However, the interesting thing here is that the symbol that seems to represent the Buccaneers does not match the Kuma paw symbol. So the original paw user might not be a Buccaneer. Now, this would fit very well with a lot of people's current theories that Lily had the paw paw fruit, but I'll reserve judgments on that for now. We'll probably cover it soon. So when you put all these ties together, it does build an interesting profile for Franky, not only getting the paw paw fruit, but potentially even taking on Kuma's will. We don't actually know much about Kuma's true will, because we've only seen him through other characters mainly. However, it is possible that the Buccaneer will is instilled in Kuma as well. That means Franky will go on to inherit Kuma's and the Buccaneer's will, and that's the role he'll play at Laugh Tale. He'll play the race of the Buccaneers or represent them. So as we conclude this voyage, the evidence speaks volumes about the paths of Franky and Kuma being intertwined, particularly more than we first realized. While the series might not spell out their connection explicitly, the breadcrumbs left by Oda does lead us to a solid conclusion. The topic is something that is strangely overlooked, particularly on YouTube it seems. TLA members Kuba the Red Sea and Straw Hat Lucas are major collaborators on this idea. And also from the TLA server, Hagen-Dazs, Lord Ragnar of the D&D, and Elson Jackson are great supporters of this theory. Additionally, Mr. Bushido himself has done a great deal of work to help add a load of extra connections, and together it's created a comprehensive base for why it's so likely for Franky to get this fruit. In summary, I think very soon Kuma is going to die. Franky is going to receive the paw paw fruit. This is going to be a nuance to the fact that he can swim underwater, making him the only devil fruit user that can be in water. I think this will tie into Pluton and Franky's heritage, as I believe Pluton to be a cyborg and potentially the first one ever made, potentially made by his ancestors. I also think that they'll use this concept to escape Egghead by going underwater, and this will lead us to the next part of our journey. Hopefully I've covered most of the points here, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and a sub, maybe even share it if you want. I know a lot of the bigger YouTubers are starting to jump on some of these theories and whatnot, so feel free to let them know. As always, you've been great. Make sure to look after yourself and the people around you. Stroke a cat, stroke a dog, lots of love, and peace.